Hi, my name is Taylor Jansen, and my poet is Edward Lear. This is Edward. He was born on May 12th of 1812 and lived until January 28th of 1888. I chose Edward because he had a love of art and was a renowned artist, and he was also very well known for his fun personality. Some facts about Edward is he was born the 21st child of his family. His family was middle class, but his father made some poor financial decisions, which forced him to move out with his older sister, who raised him as if she was his mother. She was 20 years older than him, 21 years older, sorry. So at the age of 15, Edward started working for his food, and in 1832, he received his first commission job to work for the London Zoological Society, and this was painting and drawing their exotic birds. During 1832, Edward also went and lived with the Earl of Derby and his family. He had developed this relationship that was mainly on working. He entertained the family, but that developed into something more, and he built really strong, close ties. Another fact that's little known about him is that he had suffered from some health issues. Edward had seizures that often caused him to be removed from public view because at the time these kinds of health concerns were viewed in more of a religious way, that the person was possessed, not that they had a neurological condition. So in 1837, Edward decided to travel to work on his painting and writing skills and just to see the world. He still kept his good relationship with the Earl of Derby, and he would send commissioned paintings back to the family and some writing. During his travels, he was summoned by Queen Victoria to give her some painting lessons, but his court etiquette was a little rough. So for the next 40 years, Edward traveled across Europe, and he went over to Egypt for a couple of years, and he perfected his watercolor and oil paintings. He also did sketches and some draftsmanship. I have an example. This here is a painting that he did in Egypt and sent back to the Earl of Derby and his family. He also wrote one of his first books, A Book of Nonsense, in 1846, and sent this back to the Earl of Derby for his family. This is the cover from A Book of Nonsense, and that is Edward's drawings for his books. And as you can see, they're very silly and full of nonsense. So Edward's writing is best known for his use of the limerick. A limerick is a set of 4 lines plus 1, and it's set in an AABBA format. So the first 2 lines, line 1 and line 2, and then line 5 rhyme, and line 3 and line 4 rhyme. And Edward often didn't follow this format in his writing. I can give you an example from his book called A Nonsense Alphabet. So letter A. A. A was an ant who seldom stood still, and who made a nice house in the side of a hill. A. Nice little ant. And then letter C. C. C was a cat who ran after a rat, but his courage did fail when she seized on his tail. C. Crafty old cat. So the letter A poem did not follow the standard format, but the letter C poem did. Another book that Edward was very well known for is The Owl and the Pussycat, and that is the book that I have brought to read to you today. This is illustrated, however, by a different illustrator, Janet Stevens. I will read a few pages from this book. The Owl and the Pussycat by Edward Lear, illustrated by Janet Stevens. The owl and the pussycat went to sea. In a beautiful pea-green boat. They took some honey and plenty of money, wrapped up in a 5-pound note. The owl looked to the stars above and sang to a small guitar, "Oh, lovely pussy, oh, pussy, my love, what a beautiful pussy you are. You are, what a beautiful pussy you are." Pussy said to the owl, "You elegant fowl, how charmingly sweet you sing. Oh, let us be married. Too long we have tarried, but what shall we do for a ring?" They sailed away for a year and a day. So that's an example of Edward's work. I also took a poem from his writing, A Book of Nonsense, that he wrote in 1846. This was the book that he had sent back to the Earl of Derby and his family. Poem 10. There was an old man in a tree who was horribly bored by a bee. When they said, "Does it buzz?" he replied, "Yes, it does. It's a regular brute of a bee." And this is the format that it was written in. And lastly, I would like to share a witty fact about Edward is that he was a really funny and witty man, and it went far beyond his creative writing and beautiful paintings. He often introduced himself in silly names, and a lot of them are really hard to pronounce. The one that I picked is called Shuttlecock Dairy Down Dairy Dumps. And the reason I picked this name is because when he first published his A Book of Nonsense, that was the author's name that he used to publish this book. This cover is actually from the 3rd edition, not the 1st edition, but it was the best image I could find. And it was from the British Library website. And if you go to the website I listed on my sources down here, you can actually read the pages of the book. Let's see. So, Edward Lear was a very renowned artist and writer, and he made some important friends in royalty and high places. And he did a lot of traveling to critique his craft and see different parts of the world. And for my activity today, I have chosen to do a limerick for the class. So how this will work is the teacher will give the instructions to the student, explain what a limerick is. It is the 4 lines plus 1. The first and second and fifth lines rhyme with about 8 syllables, and the third and fourth line rhyme with roughly 5 syllables. The teacher will then start a poem, such as giving the beginning of the first line, "A long time ago," and the students will then finish out the next ending of that line in 4 other lines. So an example is, "A long time ago lived a beautiful frog. She lived in a stinky old bog, dreaming of a prince charming." And then the students can help complete the ending of that. These poems should be easy for students to write because they contain silly made-up words. And then also, for a fun activity, I chose to do watercolor because this is one of Edward's styles. I did this activity with my son, and he wanted to draw a snake. And so this is his watercolor drawing of the snake. They're very simple to create. I have some watercolor paper here, and it's just a little thicker, and it has some ripples in it to help absorb the water. This is my palette. You can buy the cheap ones. I'm sure they have them at schools. This is just my watercolor from painting, and then you use watercolor brushes, and when they're done, they can put the poem with the art and post it in the classroom.